Salam alaikum. Welcome to Kunafa and Shay, a podcast produced for HowlRound Theatre Commons, a free and open platform for theatre makers worldwide. Kunafa and Shay discusses and analyzes contemporary and historical Middle Eastern and North African, or MENA, and Southwest Asian and North African, or SWANA, theatre from across the region.
I'm Marina.
And I'm Nabra.
And we're your hosts.
Our name, Kunafa and Shay, invites you into the discussion in the best way we know how, with complex and delicious sweets like kunafa and perfectly warm tea, or in Arabic, shay.
Kunafa and Shay is a place to share experiences, ideas, and sometimes to engage with our differences. In each country in the MENA or SWANA world, you'll find kunafa made differently. In that way, we also lean into the diversity, complexity, and robust flavors of MENA and SWANA theater. We bring our own perspectives, research, and special guests in order to start a dialogue and encourage further learning and discussion.
Welcome to the 5th season of Kunafa and Shay, where we delve into the dynamic world of performance art across the region. We're highlighting the creative, innovative, and artistic disruption of performance artists, exploring how their art serves as a powerful medium for expression and social change. This season features interviews with performance artists who challenge norms and use their craft to further conversations about topics like identity, diaspora, homeland, and futurity.
Yalla, grab your tea. The Shay is just right.
In this episode, we interview Mama Ganuush, a Palestinian African trans drag artist residing in the Bay Area. We will discuss their different styles of drag, the impetus they feel in creating this work, and how they envision the future of drag moving forward. Mama Ganuush is an activist who is dedicated to ending the Palestinian genocide and liberation from the Israeli apartheid. She is the founder of Heritage Activists and Liberation Artists Collective, House Ganuush, Vocal AF Open Mic, Salon Halla, Halla Cinema, and Halla Cabaret.
Today, we'll be focusing on your performance work, but you're interviewed in the first episode of Healing Home, where you talk a lot about your history and your family's history. So we very much recommend to our listeners that you check out that first kind of podcast video episode that we'll link here to learn more about Mama Ganuush's story and background. So it's just such an honor to have you here, Mama Ganuush. Thank you so much.
Yes, we're such fans.
We're big fans.
Ahlan. Me too. I'm a big fan too. I love that podcast so much, and I love Kunafa and I love Shay so much. Yeah.
Thank you. So can you describe just a little bit about your work and how you see yourself as an artist?
Yeah, I am. My discipline is more around like drag performance, but I evolved really with time to become more of a representation of Palestinian futurism, of how things would have been if I was a drag artist that was performing in Palestine if Israel never existed. So I really bring in a lot of influence from our Palestinian, like folk music and culture, but also diaspora music that I grew up in. I grew up in Egypt before moving to the to Turtle Island. I live in Ramatash Ohlone lands, which is known now as San Francisco, California. And so I do a lot of incorporation of Egyptian golden era belly dancing, just because of just me being in Egypt and also being influenced by that. But also with more of a way of expressing Palestinian like futuristic punk, I would say. So in more of like just showing Palestinians as not always just the victims, but as heroes, and how that would look like in case we never been assaulted or colonized by Israel. So that's really how I kind of represent it. Most of my work is really focused on storytelling, and a lot of like more theater performance. I am trained in like as an improv actor. That's my background, and clowning. I used to do that. And I realized with drag you could do a lot of this in just 6 minutes time instead of doing like a full like improv play for like an hour long term improv. And the last but not least, a lot of my outfits are also inspired by Palestinian tatriz motif, for instance, or specific items in Palestinian pictures for my grandparents, for instance, in Jaffa, or some of my family members, some of my elders, but bringing it more into like a futuristic way. So everything I do is just try to represent Palestine in a way that's very much um, um, have hope and power in it, but also a lot of elegance. What I also really focus on also through my work is building community and building a movement that's long lasting for Palestine. And that includes like the collective that I started, the Hala or the Heritage Activist Collective, where we have over 46 artists now, actually all around the world, that are dedicated for the liberation of Palestinians, but also liberation for all people fighting colonialism. And through that collective, I try to build alternative events because living in San Francisco, there's a lot of Zionist power and Zionist money, like the Civic Joy Fund and other funds that basically operates here. So I try to build more alternatives for artists to actually perform, for example, through the cabaret or through the salon. So this way, they could either refuse the gigs or just don't really collaborate with Zionists or people who are pro-Israel. And also, my salon is an art salon that is explicitly anti-Zionist, and it always discuss things around like key important moments that we have to like process as a community here. But also pretty much focus on local activism in San Francisco to make sure that we're addressing all the local politics and a lot of things that are heavily influenced by, unfortunately, APAC and other Zionist lobbies. So my work is really around representation of Palestinians in a more futuristic way, but also addressing current issues and building an activist movement to continue after the current support for Gaza kind of dies out or fades out. But it seems like it's not, thankfully, in the community. But I want to make sure that we are consistently supporting Palestine until total liberation. So that's really, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. I mean, that's incredible. And I just love, I mean, so many things of what you said. But in addition to like some of the performance things that we really want to talk about today, you're really working in and with community. And as we're seeing right now in the global South, like there's so much that we can learn together towards liberation. And like these movements really need each other. And so it's so inspiring to hear that the Hala Salon and Collective are working internationally with different people, all people who are victims of colonialism and imperialism, I'm sure, in different ways. So that's just really inspiring to hear.
And also important to point out something that I think a lot of folks don't think about, and I don't think as extensively or deeply about, which is the role that Zionism and pro-Israel sentiment or investment has in the arts, and that being intentional about not participating in that can be tricky and difficult, especially depending on where you are, and how much research you may have done into that at different arts institutions that one may be approached about a gig or something of that sort. Can you talk maybe more about the performance scene in San Francisco as a whole, and what it was like starting out in drag there, and maybe some of the things that made it special versus also the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, San Francisco drag is super, super radical and extremely eclectic. And it's very unique versus actually drag in most American cities or even in Europe. And that actually is influenced by how San Francisco is. And I'll give you an example. Like drag in San Francisco can't be really quantified into like ballroom drag or pageant drag. We have some of that, but we have a lot of drag that is influenced by like political movement and political statements. or also like a drag that is anti-mainstream, really, like very much like punk. So San Francisco drag scene is known to be extremely accepting for all different artists. The concept of pretty or beauty is not something that really San Francisco drag artists care about as much, although we have incredible queens that do a lot of work that is very much like mainstream drag. But we have a big influence of, for example, the trans community and drag kings and drag artists and gender bender drag. So our drag is not really just about drag queens and pageants and more women impersonating in a more of a like a classical high drag fashion. It also incorporates this and a lot of different ways of expressing yourself as drag, including being a hairy bearded queen like myself. But something that's not like repulsive in San Francisco is extremely celebrated. So just being in San Francisco scene, I was extremely inspired, even before becoming like a drag artist, by all the different drag performers and how they use their platforms for whether political movement, like trans right activism, or just having a very goofy, campy form of drag. So because of the San Francisco scene coming out of it, the art scene in San Francisco, the broader art scene in San Francisco is very limited, unfortunately. San Francisco became a tech hub with a lot of new money that doesn't really support the art as much or pay a lot into like artists. So a lot of like the fine art scene, performance art scene is pretty much limited. Where drag thrives because drag is also part of the night scene and part of the queer community, and as San Francisco as a hub for the queer community and gay liberation, that became a form of art that is really connected to the community and still have an audience and still have bars and stuff like that. So that sort of drag form of artistry still thrives in San Francisco just because of the scene. But the broader art scene is very, very, very limited. Um, and then if you look at the challenges in San Francisco when it comes to drag specifically and art in general, is that if you're somebody who doesn't want to work with pro-Israel or Zionists, it's almost impossible to find like proper funding or grants, due to the idea that actually most of the grants that we have in San Francisco for artists are limited to LGBTQ, for example, nonprofits that are funded by Israeli or pro-Israeli politicians and Israeli grants, or another grant called the Civic Joy Fund that is funded by four major Zionist families that are, actually, they're the ones who made the new Israeli fund, and they're the people who were planting, for example, trees in the settlements in Palestine. So if you're somebody who's anti-Zionist, you even get canceled in gigs. Like a lot of drag artists that I know have been canceled from one of our biggest like stages, like Oasis, for example, and others, just because of their activism for Palestine. But this said, Oakland is very close to San Francisco city, although like Oakland is basically like 20 minutes drive across the bridge from San Francisco. But Oakland is like a hub for this like pretty much like supportive grants and supportive scene for artists who are activist artists. So I feel like San Francisco with Oakland kind of compensate each other in order to support building a platform for artists who are like activist artists, which is basically what drag is all about. One of the key things, for example, that showed up with SF Pride, like our Pride Festival, as San Francisco Pride is one of the biggest prides in the world. And it is pretty much funded by a group of Zionists and very pro-cup, very pro-police organizations. And for we like a lot of artists had to like boycott basically Pride and boycott a lot of their biggest gigs if they don't want to operate or sort of work in the process of branding Israel and normalize it, through like a lot of this like pink washing campaigns that happens through like SF Pride and other things. But as a community, we came together and built alternatives for this. So that's why we're the Cabaret Palestine and Cabaret Hala came, and a lot of other events are happening all around Oakland and San Francisco, which is pretty much grassroots and very like grungy and very like community put together versus like funded by organizations in order to put out a platform that represents San Francisco drag, which is a radical drag that is an activist drag. That's the background of it. It's like not gender conformative and not conformed by any form of means. Um, and also like sort of addressing mainstream support for Israel, even in the drag community, and on the broader drag scene that basically try to neutralize Israel and neutralize these issues as something that drag is all about clowning and a lot about like dancing and fun in pubs and clubs versus drag is a form of protest. So I would say like to sum it up, drag in San Francisco is extremely rich with a lot of people that come from a different sort of point of view when it comes to drag performance and others. And the nightlife scene in general is still thriving because San Francisco night scene is thriving as a queer scene. And our biggest struggle is really being able to widen your platform if you wanna be somebody who is really against Israel. Really, like Israel is an issue. One of the biggest issues that we have in San Francisco in terms of flourishing as an art scene and as a drag scene. If you're a Palestinian or pro-Palestinian liberation, your problem is just being pro-Palestinian, just because of all the Zionist funding. And and I don't know if I know that this is specific about like the art itself, but I'm very happy to dive deeper into why this becomes like a pretty big Zionist gay hub, San Francisco, and why it's very difficult to do true liberation work, and also like sort of perform and utilize that platform that radical drag and radical activism in San Francisco due to that. So I was happy to dig into this, but I don't know if I was able to answer your question. But I'm happy to dive deeper into the art piece. Yeah.
You absolutely did, and we can dive into anything. I also listened to you were featured in a pinkwashing genocide panel on Sad Francisco, which is I guess a podcast, but it was a live event. And we really recommend that to go deeper into pinkwashing in the Bay Area scene as well. I think you really go into that, but we would love to get into that too. Like, there's nothing off limits in this podcast. And also something I'm curious about is whether that the elements of activism in drag was something that attracted you to get into drag in the first place. Did you recognize that, or that there were other Palestinian drag artists, or that was a space where you could make the kind of statements that you wanted to make, or was there another reason you got specifically into that art form and then kind of discovered that later?
That's so beautiful. That's a good question. Honestly, no, I came to it from my trans experience. So, the first time I was dating a drag queen, her name is Cassidy LeBlanc. She's also my drag mother, technically, because she's the first one to put me in drag. And when Casey or Cassidy put me in drag for the first time, I had like a full body orgasm. And I was pretty much in touch with for the first time, I really truly felt gender euphoria. And it wasn't about like uh the women aspect of it. It's about the femininity and the clown. Like it was very satisfying for my gender. That's one of the reasons actually I went into drag, because I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally explore. It was like a gender exploration journey through drag, because you could literally come up with any form of um alter ego, or any form of, you know, whoever you want to be through drag. And then the first thing here in my mind is Mama Ganuush, which is basically my drag name. And I thought about it because of my aunts, and they are very loud, especially the from Gaza. I'm half Ghazawi, half Yafari. And I have my grandmother who's like African. Um, that my family always shamed us. That's a whole thing with Palestinians. But my Ghazawi side is very loud, is extremely gregarious. They laugh they're extremely powerful. They're kind of messy, especially my mom. She's very messy. She's a hairy woman, like, you know. So I just imagine how my mom looks like. And if my mom was like a madam or a drag queen, how that would look like. And that gave me so much power. Because it's also happened to be most of these women in my life are muqawam, like they were in Jabha Shabiya, they were like in different movements. So I have these like sort of elder women who like were badass in their youth. They're still badass, but they're hairy and they are chubby and they're cute and they are, you know what I mean, and they're loud and they could do whatever the fuck they want. And they have really extreme eyebrows. Uh, the term of the lighting of the eyebrows is insane to me. So I had that sort of vision in my brain, and I that became my drag character. And this unapologetic, like sort of force of laughter, but also power and very entertaining. So that's where Mama Ganuush came from. And then I used that to kind of explore a lot of my favorite songs. And my favorite songs, first, my drag wasn't really purely like Arabic or purely Palestinian as it is right now. But I was very much inspired by Nina Simone and a few other artists in my life, so and Amy Winehouse and others. So I started using my drag to do this, and I also realized people don't know anything about Nadia Gindi and other like Egyptian B-rated actresses and artists, and so I started doing a lot of like sort of camp drag to introduce these different characters. Like there's a B-rated movie for Nadia Gindi called Muhimma Tel Aviv, which is hilarious. You have to watch it. It's like really funny. It's not meant to be funny, but it's really funny. So I was like exploring a lot of these like sort of pop culture moments because I grew up in Egypt with a Palestinian perspective because Palestinians always made fun of Egyptians, although they were very like, you know, I mean, they were very attracted to Egyptians, but they also make fun of them. So that was like this whole complexity came out of it. And then I also tried to do storytelling through improv, and I really love engaging with the audience a lot. And also being a theater actor, you can't really break character, even if you're doing improv. What I felt in drag, you could do that. You could go in and like, you know, mess with the audience and like, you know what I mean? Like dance with someone or like tickle someone or talk to someone. Not tickle, sorry. Like, I mean, like sentimentally, like touch them. I mean, but it's more like you're able to engage with the audience better. And I love to have that sort of moment with the audience. And also show a lot of power in my hairiness, in my gender bender, and I felt like my trans experience is fluid, and this is how my drag also represents. But this is how it started, really. But then, and then the Iran, the assault on these women in Iran started at that time. And I grew up with a lot of religious trauma. I grew up in a Sunni household, and I went through conversion therapy, and I had like a very traumatic experience growing up with religion and my gender journey. So that was a moment for me of like reassessing this and coming out with anger against like oppression against women or feminine expression in general. So this is really where my drag went from like I'm having fun including my gender into I'm gonna tell you now that women in not just in Iran but in a lot of the SWANA regions are oppressed. And I started did a lot of content around forced circumcision for women and forced gender surgery, like in Iran, they force people to go through gender journey, and a lot of different like sort of accusations of assault that nobody really cares about in the Arab world specifically, not just Iran, when it comes to queer people and women or people who are like femme expressing folks. And then when the genocide, and for me, because Palestine for me was an issue that it's like a deep pain that it's very hard for me to process. And also Palestine for me is always related with martyrism. I come from a family. My grandfather was killed by Israelis in Gaza. My uncles were killed in Jaffa in 48. My father was Jabha Sha'bi. My father was imprisoned before, like my mom. Like I have like it's a very pure form of like Palestine for me is like this pure glory that I felt like it's so hard for drag to touch because this is Palestine. And when I talk about Palestine in the past, my activism was focused on poetry and other forms that are a little bit more, I felt at that time like Puritan, because I felt like Palestine for me was like something so glorious. But then when I realized that in San Francisco, all of these queer scenes that I was in, the minute I talk about Palestine, people feel uncomfortable. I got shut down, and then everybody's a Zionist, literally. Like everybody from my local representative, Raphael Mendelman, all the way to the federal government, they're all Zionists. Like Raphael Mendelman, like even my district person and everyone else, like they even have Israeli citizenships. You know what I mean? So I realized I was like, hell no. Like we need to talk about, like we need to address Palestine in a form that just brings Palestine and surface it up. And for me to take that, I looked at the form of Palestinian artistry, like the trees, debke, food. There's a lot of different forms. Belly dancing is not a thing in Palestine. They do like Ras al Hawanim, which is a very gentle dance with the shoulders. It's like my mom would dance like this. But this is not for me like something I wanted to sort of make it into like a caricature. So I felt like the Egyptian side of my diaspora. Was the belly dancing part with debke. So I start doing both of them. So I do debke and belly dance like in my performances. So I try to start sort of infusing things built on Palestinian diaspora and Palestinian art into my form of drag. And this is what it evolved from, an expression for feminism and trans rights into like Palestinian liberation and all liberation. So it's kind of a process of how even my artistry evolved, and that was expressed itself in the music, the performance, the choreography, the format itself, and even the clothing and the look and the character. So in the past, I used to wear more wigs, and now I wear this fez, like this like black fez that my grandfather wore in one of his old pictures, my great grandfather, but in a very gendered way. So this way, it kind of looks like I look like a Palestinian بالإبا والأنباز, and like, and I look like my grandfather, but at the same time, I am my mother, Husni Abid. You know what I mean? And it's I don't know, it's a kind of a very evolved way of like um it's a journey really to do that. Um yeah, let me pause. Sorry, I speak too much, so please let me know if I'm over speaking. Yeah.
Not at all. Um, it was so great to hear you talk about that journey. And the next question that we were going to ask you, which I feel like you started to answer, but I would be interested to see if there were other things that come to your mind, was just about when now 300 plus days ago, this most recent genocide against Palestinians began, how that's really affected your work, because you've always been vocal about Palestine, but I think even more so, and we've seen also in what you were saying about not just in your performance work, but really also looking at the larger scope of performance in San Francisco and elsewhere, which has been illuminating, because a German friend recently said to me, oh, to get artist grants now in Germany, you have to sign something that says you agree with the definition of anti-Semitism that ties it to anti-Zionism. And I was like, oh, that's not really a thing in the States in the same way. But actually, everything you're saying is sort of saying that that is a thing. And so that's been illuminating for me. But yes, would love to hear any more that you have to say around this topic.
Yeah, so to kind of address your first thought, and thank you for that. This is such a great question, and a follow up on this. On October 7th, after after the resistance actually like attacked the Israeli state, or the occupying Israeli state, and October 8th started with a genocide. I lost almost 176 family members at that time. My mom's family is min Beit Abed. Abed are huge family. Mishajaiya, they are like from the heart of Gaza. Like in 1993, there was 2,650 people registered as my family members over 16 years old. Like I have a huge family. And my father's mom is min Beit al-Aisawi, which is also another big family in Palestine. And then Beit al-Sulta, where I'm from, is a very small family from Jaffa. But I have a bigger family. It's like we're intermarried and cousins to Akili, Aisawi, Shurafa, Al-Ashi. Like these are all big Palestinian families. Jarada. So I lost from Beit Abid, almost Beit al-Aisawi, almost 176. So that was a moment of um, witnessing what you have always heard as stories when you're young about Sabra Shatile, Aidul Aswad, and I'm Deir Yassin, like these stories. I realize it's happening to me in my lifetime, that I'm actually witnessing my people's genocide. I'm not just hearing stories about the genocide that happened to my people, including my family members, including cousins I grew up with. Um, so that for me was very, very uh, painful. And this is where I started when I decided that I will be always um, Palestinian. There's a woman called Nabila Mango who was my mentor. She was like the Palestinian mayor, basically, of Palestinians here in San Francisco. On her deathbed, she had cancer. She died earlier in the genocide. And she told me that there is so much drag artists and everything else, but there's very few Palestinian voices in general. And that moment was with me. I was like, for me, now and forever, I would not be doing any form of music that is not Palestinian or for Palestinians or is not Arabic. And I thought about what can I do at that moment. It's heavy, it's very traumatic, it's very hard to process this. So I use my platform to process this. Like I use my platform to shout and say like fuck you since October 8th, like the minute that happened. And at that time it was very difficult because and I started really talking to queer institutions to show up for Palestine and calling them out one by one, because all of them showed up for Iran, Iranian women, all of them showed up for Ukraine. Um, and why they're not showing up for Palestinians. And I realized that I didn't know that in California and in actually 37 states in America, the state will not give you funding, including grants, if you are anti-Israel, not just anti-Zionist. If you're anti-Israel, the state could not have the right not to work with you and boycott you. And teachers, actually, in San Francisco right now, they have to sign a form that they are not anti-Israel. It's part of the state laws. It's in 37 states in America. And a lot of people don't actually know that how much anything anti-Israel means no funding by the states, including also you could lose your job, like if you talk against Israel as a teacher, for instance. And then the other thing that happened is I was applying for grants at that time, and I was rejected from these grants. And I learned that these grants are coming from three sources: the Yuba Buena. This is an organization that's extremely Zionist. The SF Art organization, like the MoMA, they're extremely Zionist. And also there's the Civic Joy Fund that is actually founded by a Zionist who's Israeli. His name is Manny Yukatil, and is completely like supported by this the Pritzker family, the Hyatt people, extremely Zionist. They're the ones why Illinois, for example, put in their code that they have to invest with Israel as a state, like J.B. Pritzker. It's part of this family that's like funding the arts in San Francisco. So um, that was a moment of like, oh, I just can't just be angry and express my pain. I also need to build I need to build a movement. I need to build something where people would stay in and will always be talk about liberation of Palestine after this hype of like supporting Palestine would go away. Because at that time, no one realized that the genocide will continue for 8 months. You know what I mean? We thought the UCG, like the International Criminal Justice Court thing, was the end of it. Like when they find Israel has a genocidal state, that would be the end of it. That's what I thought. And even I remember when the USCG even said that sort of half-baked thing about Israel back in January, I was dancing in the streets. Like I was so happy. I even did like a drag show. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, yeah, my people took their day in court. And I realized that this is not happening. So I feel like uh, I have to show up And for me as a Palestinian, to show up is to use my platform to build unity through art and also provide hope for the people, because I was very hopeless. Like I was in December, my cousin Hamad al-Ashi, Allah yarhamu, was killed in an Anan building massacre where Israelis brought 11 men and shot them in front of their family. That's one of them is Muhammad al-Ashi, my cousin, Allah yarhamu, Muhammad. And uh, like when you walk on the street that day, it was around right before Christmas, like December, like was in mid-December. And then on Christmas Eve, they were bombing my family, Lebrej. Nusayrat to Lebrej, Maghazi was bombed. They killed 77 people. My family, my Yafa family lives in Lebrej. And people around me, they just don't see you. Like, they don't see you. They don't understand what the hell is going on with you. But also, I was very much suppressed by Instagram, removed my app, my page at that time 3 times. TikTok, there was a lot of suppression for Palestinian voices. I felt so hopeless, so hopeless. And then I talked to my mom, um, Hosni Aibid, and then she told me, my mom told me, we have been doing this for so long, and it's about how you show up every day, and Palestine will be free at some point of your life. You just have to keep pushing, you know? And for me, I was like, that's a really good reminder that I don't have to change things right now, but this is a long play. For me to continue this process, I have to bring hope through my art to myself, but also to be a hope for the community. And it's not like fake hope. I feel like hope is so important in resistance and art because otherwise, my pain was taking over my artistry. Like I was literally doing lip syncing on Hind, the call from this little girl that was killed by Israelis. I was literally I was putting on like radio calls about massacre and genocide to people on big stages. And this is my drag show. I'm standing and I'm listening to this and letting them listen to that. And I realized this form, it is important, but people don't really like people shut down from it sometimes. So I try to figure out the format that will bring hope and also a reminder of justice because my pain is really profound, and even talking about right now, it's just it is so painful um to witness your people's genocide, like so painful. So I for me, hope and resistance is what I really focus on, and me showing up for Palestine and bringing that sort of inspiration for people is just so important to continue the movement. The other thing that I realized, I am in activist spaces. I don't sign up for any specific organization. I organize with all of them because my outcome is liberation of Palestine, not being part of a nonprofit or abolitionist or anarchist. But I realized people don't talk to each other in these movements. So that's where I built also like for the bigger audience, there's art pieces that I do that talks about Palestine culture in a very futuristic way that brings hope. But for the activist community, I built these salon and gatherings. So this way they could talk to each other and also recruit new people into the movement, like educate people about Palestine and Palestinian liberation. And that becomes like a continuous thing. So people could reference me as the Palestinian drag artist versus referencing me as the trans drag artist. I don't give a shit if somebody referenced me as trans or not. I really care about people remembering me as a Palestinian. Um, so yeah, sorry. How are you guys? That was a lot. Yeah.
It is a lot, but that's because it's a lot. A genocide is a lot, and Allah yarhamhum for your family and for all who've been martyred.
Allah yarhamhum.
And yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing everything that you just did with us. It's been, I mean, as someone like Nabra and I are fans of Mama Ganuush, I think it's clear. And so we, see on your Instagram the different things that you've shared. And it has been inspirational to see you continue to do, I mean, the different performances that you have, but also, I mean, I hate the phrase raising awareness, but I do feel like that's something that I've seen is that people who have had almost no idea, I feel like from seeing your work have understood more about Palestinian liberation, and how that is connected to all liberation. And so, I mean, I just feel like seeing your work has been really inspirational, and I'm so grateful that you've continued to push forward, even though, I mean, making art is hard. Making art during a genocide is impossible, I think, sometimes, doing anything during a genocide. Um, so yeah, it's sort of hard to like to put I think all of our feelings on this call into words, but I think gratitude is the word that I have for you and your work.
And the other thing I want to share with you is um Palestinians, like, they fucking بيزغرتوا when somebody get killed. Like, they stand up and بيزغرتوا. Like, they start, like, for somebody who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, they do, like, basically celebratory chants because they know that these kids are going to paradise or martyrism, or just kind of a power of, like, yeah, I didn't lose them for, I mean, hopefully all Palestinians would die safely in their beds. They don't have to die in a genocide. But I mean by that is, like, there's so much power in Palestinians. So if I don't celebrate my Palestinian heritage and also my Palestinian resistance and power, I'm doing my people, like, wrong, because my people are so fucking strong and incredible. There's nobody like Palestinians in this entire world. I tell people, like, our ancestors are saints, and prophets that you pray for, our killed are martyrs, and our living are heroes. Like, no one is like Palestinians for me. So, but also we are celebratory people. All our dancing is extremely celebratory. Even the ones that, like, yeah, Yumma fi dagga ababna, talk about, like, going to the shashad and to go to protect your safety. Like, all of our songs are celebratory, and that's where we come from. Like, we do express our pain through art, and this is part of my people. This is what we do as Palestinians. But the other thing also is that um it takes time to start quantifying things, right? Because as an artist, you evolve as an artist, but then you don't know what to do with your platform for a minute. You're just so much in pain, and you're like, I need everybody to listen to my pain. And now I realize it's like people need a call to action. So this is where I started. I have a boycott list. If you go to mamaganuush.com/nope, this is a boycott list for over 760 organizations and businesses and entities that supports Israel in a genocide, including local entities. Like, it's a submission form from all around the world, but a lot of it is, like, city level, including a lot of businesses in Israel there's 300 businesses in Israel that operating in illegal settlements, selling stuff on Etsy. I got these bitches down. And then, sorry about the terms. And then the other thing, I have the yes list, which is basically the yeah list. It's on my same website, where you could go and also learn about venues and entities that supports liberation that you could actually invest in or do things in. So I'm trying to build some form of archives and resources for the community. So this becomes like something that we could build on, right? So the other thing I also worked on is, on my website, there's a facts section about everything you want to learn about Palestine, Palestinians, pinkwashing, Zionism, Israel, everything else. And then you could also see archives of testimony of my own father from Jaffa about his own, like, fleeing Jaffa when he was 16 years old, in 1948, and also a story of how my input as a Palestinian trans person who is an artist could be referenced in anyone who could talk about Palestinians in a form that we are a transphobic community. Because I want people to look at me not just as an artist to provide hope, but also an example. If somebody tells you, like, Palestinians kill their children because they're trans, tell them, check out Mama Ganuush, because my eyelashes are called Lulu after my aunt, the Ghazda, who loves my fucking eyelashes. You know what I mean? And my people protected me all this life as a trans person, as a queer person, as somebody with multiple sclerosis. I live with a disability, versus, like, Israelis who are killing all of us. So I'm trying to be uh, a part of a conversation for someone else as a reference for Palestinian trans people. And then the last but not least is I also wanna continue liberation. Like we have to show up as Palestinians every day, and we have to like evolve our artistry. And I feel like that's part of a revolution art. Like every revolution, every movement, there is an art. And I feel like the art coming from the movement is sort of what uh, continues like the footsteps of these movements. So I am very honored that you said some of my work sort of advocated for Palestine. That's the best thing I heard actually today. I swear to God, because I feel like I live in a very like a very bubble place. I'm always like doing things or doing a lot of like activism work, but I feel like I am isolated by social media limitations. I am isolated by platforms that is provided to Palestinians. It's very limited in San Francisco and other places. I feel so good that my voice was heard and reached other people. So that's like that brings me so much joy. Really, I feel like I am pretty much like if I die tomorrow, I'll be satisfied. You know what I mean? Like, alhamdulillah, we did it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I know it sounds intense. I don't know. I know I heard the podcast and I know it sounds a little bit too intense, guys. I'm sorry. I want to bring some joy and laughter to you today too, um, but you have brought me so much joy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, being with you is a joy. And I think anyone who's listening to this is learning a lot, taking in a lot. And I mean, all of the resources you just outlined are a huge gift. And so, right, I mean, sometimes I think the thing about capitalism, one of them, is that it makes sure that we don't have the time, right? So that we don't have the time to do these things, to figure out like, oh, what do we boycott? What do we do? Whatever. Mama Ganuush has done it. Go to the nope list, right? / nope. I love that. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
But you've done all of this work, and so hopefully people that are listening will link your account so people can find you, and that way they can also look at your great drag stylings and like the work that you do. As someone with an autoimmune disease that feels like people do not talk about chronic illnesses enough in the arts world. I've been so grateful for a lot of your posts that deal with that as well. And so, I mean, I hope that everyone here listening will just go and you use the word like continue in the footsteps of this artistic work. And I feel like that's a great call to action for us to be able to end this episode on too. They have resources. You can go do this. They can connect with you, but also just continue in the footsteps of the political activist artistic beautiful work that you're doing as an artist but just as a person too. Like getting to have this call with you is energizing in many ways because it makes us feel like, oh yes, like I want to be part of this community that you are or fostering and growing. And so yeah, this has just been a gift for both of us. Thank you so much for your time and for your energy and your work.
Thank you so much. And can I do one last thing?
Oh,
Is that
please,
okay?
please. Yeah.
Like being Palestinian, also being trans, but also being somebody disabled. There's a lot of like all the events that we do are accessible for people with disability, and also accessible for people neurodivergent. So we don't use like weird flashlights and things like that. Like we make sure that things are very, very accessible for people. And I feel like if anyone wants to join the collective, they could join my collective. It's called Hala. And you could go also my website, it's right there. I know what's a website. I'm such a millennial, but that's like everything is I feel like as resource there because social media there's a lot of like sometimes limitations on things. So I just urge everyone to check out the collective. If you want to join, it's an open collective for anyone. There's a forum to join. You could stay autonomous too because it's an activist collective. So and it's also trans led and queer led, but we have two token straight people. But we have a lot of it's like an activist collective. It's not just a trans collective. So I want to just invite everyone to join. The last but not least is that me as a Palestinian trans artist and activist, I'm a continuation of history of thousands of years of Palestinians who came who are also trans and queer. Because like Palestinians are not thought about in a vacuum of the last 76 years of European colonization. Palestinians are as old as the god El, And God El is the oldest Canaanite god in the whole world. This is the god that basically like sort of introduced the idea of monotheism to even before people knew what God is. And this was a Palestinian god. And that god has deities who are queer and trans, and there's like history of Palestinians' liberation, of queer and trans artists in the time of the Ottomans, the Romans, the Greeks, and all the way until the British colonization, and then the Israeli settler state. So just kind of a reminder that we don't come from a vacuum. We come from a land of ancient gods and history, and queer and trans Palestinians always survived and thrived and been protected by their own people, and they're going to continue being protected by their own people, not by colonizers. So this is sort of a last thing I want to leave you with. You guys are also an output of many generations of freedom and incredible people. So,
MashaAllah. Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
This podcast is produced as a contribution to HowlRound Theatre Commons. You can find more episodes of Kunafa and Shay and other HowlRound podcasts by searching HowlRound wherever you find podcasts. If you loved this podcast, please post a rating and write a review on your platform of choice. This helps other people find us. You can also find a transcript for this episode, along with a lot of other progressive and disruptive content on the HowlRound.com website. Have an idea for an exciting podcast, essay, or TV event the theater community needs to hear? Visit HowlRound.com and contribute your ideas to the Commons.
Yalla, bye.